Hey everyone, Gingerbeard Mark here, your favourite Wolverhampton-based podcast and Q&A host. That's probably not true. Unless you're my mom, then that could be true. Never know. Hi Mum. This episode was recorded live at Wolverhampton Literature Festival at Wolverhampton Art Gallery on the 5th of March, I believe. It's with the awesome Emma Kennedy talking about her recent book, Letters to Brenda, all about her mother. And I love the book, and it was such an honour and such a giggle to chat with Emma. She's so brilliant and so fascinating and just such a lovely, warm, kind person, you know. So it was really enjoyable, and I hope that comes across in the recording. We had a bit of trouble with the recording, I must say. My sound guy Rob worked a double shift on this one, so if it does sound slightly dodgy in places, I can only apologise, but he did wonders with my terrible recording abilities. So please enjoy my chat with Emma Kennedy, live from Wolverhampton Literature Festival.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wolverhampton Literature Festival. I'm Gingerbeard Mark. I'm a local podcaster, but this is the lady we're here to talk about today. Author, actor, broadcaster, and lawyer, Emma Kennedy.
Ex-lawyer.
Ex-lawyer. Emma, I was meant to give you this, wasn't I? Emma's going to do a little reading just to start us off.
Thank you.
Thank you. I said, do you mind doing a reading? She was like, only if I can steal your book.
I never have one with me. I'm useless.
They're just going to do your mic?
Okay. This is very short, so don't panic. I want to tell you the story of my mother. When she died, I was a mess, caught in a riptide of grief I had no chance of escaping. But by small degrees, I found myself floating out of it. I wasn't quite sure what to do next. Grief does funny things to you. It makes you wary and desperate, as if you found yourself in an unwanted friendship with someone who is overly needy. It demands things of you, forcing you to lay bare a life cradle to grave. It requires you to stare at a person under an unflinching light. Grief is a terrible burden. It has taken me 7 years to be able to write this book. It is a story of a girl, a teenager, a woman, a wife, a lover, a mother. It's a story that involves betrayal, bigamy, disappointment, a suicide attempt, affairs, love, passion, and fury. My mother and I had a complicated relationship. She was difficult and volatile, but I knew that wasn't the whole story. In fact, I realised I didn't really know her story at all. I had no idea what I would find when I lifted the rocks of her life. I hadn't intended to do it, but a sudden, unexpected call from my father changed all that. This book is the story of Brenda.
As you say, the sort of blurb for the book is 2 suitcases, 75 lost letters,
Yes.
1 mother.
Yes.
And that, for anyone that doesn't know, who hasn't read the book yet, that's what the call from your father.
Yes. So my mother had been dead for 3 years, and my father suddenly decided that he was going to sell the family home and move to a smaller place. And I think, you know, it's that thing when if you've been someone who's been married and has been in a long relationship for many decades, and your partner dies, and it takes you a while to just settle and then think, actually, I want to move on. So that's what happened with him. And the new owner found 2 leather suitcases up in the attic. And in them were 75 letters written by my mother to me. And Dad said, "Do you want them?" Yes, I want them. But it was interesting in that it took me ages to actually read them. When I got them, it was sort of like they were dynamite, and I didn't want to touch them. And but it took me another year to like go, okay, this is it. I'm going to read them now. And another interesting thing happened. A lot of them I had never seen before. and a couple I had seen before. And what that meant was she had found them in my house and had taken them back. But I think the reason for that was because I think one of the things, my mother's life, I was sort of to go on and discover and conclude, was sort of a series of thwarted opportunities. And she was of that generation of women where you weren't really allowed to be ambitious. And if you came from the background that she came from, you certainly couldn't have ideas of having a creative profession. So I think she would have loved to have been a professional writer, and I think that comes across in the letters when you read them, because they don't read like letters, do they? They read like monologues, and some of them read like short stories. So I think that was why she took the letters back, because I think in her brain it was her body of work. So that's why I think she took them back. But so then when I read them, I mean, they are so funny, aren't they? Some of them.
They really are.
And I think that was the catalyst, because the one thing about my mum was that it was very clear to me that she had been suffering from had suffered from an undiagnosed mental illness for all of her life, but it was never ever spoken about. Never. And it is something that I've never got over, that she never had any help in her lifetime. And it was something as an adult that I sort of became to feel was really problematic. And I felt really guilty that as an adult I didn't do more to try and help her or resolve the problem. But I think, and if anyone here has ever been or has a member of their family, or especially a parent who has had a mental illness, it's sort of like you don't bring it up because you don't want the bad person to come back into the room. So with my mum, there was bad Brenda and there was good Brenda. And good Brenda was absolutely amazing. She was the single most charismatic person I've ever met in my life. She was, I always think of her, she was like a wild horse. And if you went into a field and you saw a wild horse coming towards you, and if that wild horse was docile and wanted to spend time with you, you would think it was the most magical experience of your life. And Brenda was that. It's like, if you met her, she was a once met, never forgotten person, because she was so charismatic and incredible. And she was very, very beautiful as well. I look like my dad, which is really annoying. But there was also bad Brenda. So in the way that wild horse can, like, you think this is incredible, it can also rear up and smash your brain out with its hooves. So that was bad Brenda. And bad Brenda could arrive in the room on literally like that. So it becomes ingrained in you to not be the person who is responsible for making bad Brenda come into the room. Sort of like a monster under the bed, really. Yeah. But nothing was ever done about it. And so after I read the letters, it then took me another year to I couldn't get rid of it. I couldn't get rid of that thought of what had been wrong with her. Yeah. Or not what was wrong with her, but what had she been burdened with for all of her life. And so that was when I thought, I have to write this book. And I've never had a feeling that I had to write anything before this book. But this book, I absolutely had to write it.
Yeah. Because it's sort of a mature take on the aren't parents odd sort of thing. But rather than just saying like, oh, here's some sort of wild stories that my mum told me through letters, you sort of you go further and investigate why. Why was this odd behaviour? Why did she lie? Why did she...
I mean, there was loads of things about her mum. I think the thing that was most fascinating to me was finding out what her childhood had been like, because she was quite sort of sketchy about all that. But she had been, they lived in quite extreme poverty, And I think it all begins really with her mum, who had come over from Ireland. And I only discovered when I was trying to get my Irish passport after Brexit that she'd lied about her age. And on her wedding certificate, it says that she was 21 and he was 19. And I discovered she was 31. I mean, that's brass, isn't it? That is brassy. So she came over at a time when you didn't want to be Irish in this country. I think she pretended she was Welsh for a significant period of time, because that was the time when she would have seen signs up that said no blacks, no dogs, no Irish, and no Irish was at the bottom. So it's quite nice. It's quite a lovely sort of circle that she didn't want anyone to know that she was Irish or have anything to do with her culture, and I couldn't become Irish quick enough. It was quite extraordinary. But because of that, so there was that shame that she was Irish at a time when being Irish was bad. My grandfather was a communist, naturist, vegetarian, which at that time, it was niche. Yeah. It was niche.
There's a great photo in the book of him posed naked.
Oh yes. I remember seeing him when I was a child mowing the lawn naked in Battersea, where the fences are this high. I mean, it was just extraordinary. He just didn't care. Anyway, he was a terrible womanizer, and he ran off. And so that was another level of shame. So my mother and her younger sister, and especially my mother, who was a bit older, she was around sort of 11, and her sister was only about 3. But it was drilled into them that nobody must ever know their business. So it was just encouraging children to keep secrets, that this is the way you function. You have to keep everything secret. And there was clearly something awry with my mum, because I discovered that at the age of 11, she tried to kill herself.
It's not usual behaviour.
No, and especially then, when there wasn't all social media and you'd know about this stuff. Yeah. And I said to her once, because I always had to tread very carefully when talking about anything to do with mental health with her. She would tell this story very occasionally, but whenever she told it, she would tell it as if it was funny, as if it was a funny anecdote that she'd thrown herself out of a upstairs window and tried to kill herself. And I said to her, did anyone help you? Were you sent to see a doctor or anything? And she just said, no, I was sent round to my aunt and she gave me a piece of cake. And that was it. That was the help she got. But that's indicative of that time. Yeah. And I think women of that generation, I mean, men as well, they will have suffered mental illness, but they had to go through postnatal depression on their own with no help. And my mother did have postnatal depression. They had to get through the menopause with no help. And that's only starting to get better now. But the other big thing that I think affected my mother greatly was the fact that if you were married and you got pregnant, that was the end of your career. And my mother had clearly done absolutely everything she could to get herself out of the situation that she had been in. Yeah. And she'd managed it, and she'd done it. And she was going to be a teacher. And it was going to be great. And this was it. And she wanted a career and she wanted to work. And I was conceived on the night of their honeymoon. So there was literally no breathing space whatsoever. It was, I think she'd been working for 6 months and then she got pregnant with me. And that was devastating to her, and I get it. And I think as a consequence of that, her career then as a full-time teacher was over. What happened then was that basically you were allowed to do part-time, and that was it. And it wasn't what she wanted. And I'm sad to say that my relationship with her is sort of split into 3 sections. But as a child, I genuinely had no sense that she liked me at all. None. And that's fine. I'm over it now. That's fine. I sort of came good for her when I was 19, and from 19 onwards, we got on like a house on fire, really. But that first period when I was a child, I was just terrified of her. That was it.
As you got older, though, it's almost like she's like the ballet mom, or who's living vicariously through you.
Oh,
it's like your achievements became our achievements.
She couldn't get over it. She couldn't get over the fact that I'd got into Oxford. That was the single greatest thing. And she would say we went to Oxford, but she just couldn't get over that. And then obviously when I became a lawyer, she was like those jokes where if I'd been drowning, she would have shouted out, please, please, someone help my daughter, the lawyer. So, but also when I was, because she was so combative and she loved threatening people with legal action, even though she never went to a lawyer in her life. When I became a lawyer, it was like I was her consigliere. She couldn't believe it. She was like, I can't believe I've now got a lawyer that I can just phone 24/7 and ask whether I can take someone to court and ruin them forever. No, you can't. No, you can't do that. No. So when I told her that I was giving up the law, she sort of took to her bed for 3 months like she had a Victorian illness. She just couldn't understand it. Because I suppose from her perspective, if you think about what had happened to her and what she'd pulled herself out from, that what I had managed to do was just sort of, I suppose, an extension of that.
Yeah.
And she couldn't understand that I would throw that away willingly for, at that point, what seemed like nothing.
But then it's like as soon as she starts seeing you on the television and on the radio...
When I introduced her to Rory Bremner, at that point it was all lovely. And to Judy Finnegan, who for some inexplicable reason, at the end she said, thank you, Julie. Julie. Oh, my God. But my mum was an extraordinary woman. She basically, in 1971, she read Female Eunuch, and just then thought that considered that was her manual for life. Now, it was literally just down to... So she never cooked me a single meal in my entire life. She didn't even make me a cup of tea in my lifetime. Not even a cup of tea. And there was one week, I must tell this story, there was one week where my dad had to go and have an operation on his ear. And he was going to be in hospital for a week. And we stood in the hallway, and I had my PE kit over one shoulder. I think I was about 11, or 10 or 11. And I looked at her, and she looked at me, and I said, okay, I'm not looking after you this week. Do you understand? And she went, yeah, okay, yeah. And it's like she'd really taken it in. And I came back from school, and she opened the door, and she looked thrilled, like absolutely the smuggins of smug. And she said, would you like your first course? And I thought, what is this? What? And she put in front of me a pot of cockles. And we couldn't get the lid off. So we had to abandon that. And then I said, what are you making for the second course? And she sort of looked up into the sky as if she was trying to think on the spot. And she just went, rice and garlic? And I said, no, it's fine. I'll make her sandwiches. And then what she did that week, every day, was she made me phone up a different friend, and I'd be on the phone, and she'd go, just cry a bit. And I'd be going, can I come for tea because my dad's in hospital? And they'd go, ask their mum. They said, of course you can come for tea. And then she'd be going, and me. And me. And so like, can my mum come as well? And then so we would both go to a different friend for supper every evening. And I was just mortified by the entire thing. And I would insist on doing the washing up at the end. And she'd be just sitting at the table laughing her head off because she couldn't believe what a brilliant wheeze she'd come up with. And I remember at one evening I said to her, Mum, are you going to help me do the washing up? And she went, Emma, I can't lift a pan. My womb will drop out. This is what we were dealing with.
But it is, isn't it? She has funny comebacks to it. Anything you sort of say to her, she has the perfect line or the perfect reason of why she couldn't possibly do that, or why she's not possibly in the wrong.
Yes. Oh, no. She was never in the wrong, never. No, never.
There's obviously there's 75 letters, but they're not all in the book.
No, they're not all in there.
So is there any highlights from the letters that you didn't include that are worth bringing up?
No, I think the ones that are in the book are the best ones. The rationale behind the ones that I picked was because obviously in the book I reveal some quite full-on things that I discovered. Yeah. And I wanted to be fair to her. I wanted to be really fair. And I wanted to give people a sense of who she really was, apart from my interpretation of her. So, and I also wanted to have a sense that she was interrupting all the way through, because that's what she used to do. You know, if you were in a room with her, she would always be, you know, holding court and running the conversation and all of that, because she had this incredible energy, and I wanted to give a sense of that, because I think if I hadn't put the letters in, I think I would understand if someone read it and thought she was a monster. Yes. But she wasn't a monster. This was a big thing for me when I was and it took me till my early 30s, because as I said, my childhood I was terrified of her. My 20s, I sort of resented her because of my childhood. But in my 30s, I was able to sort of sit back and say, actually, do you know what? She wasn't bad, she was ill. And that changes everything in terms of how you think about someone and how you process things that have happened to you. And
because obviously the context around the letters, because I think if you just read the letters on their own without the context, you could think, oh, what a wonderful mother.
Exactly so.
It's like Dear Emsy.
Exactly so, yeah. If you just read the letters, then you would think, my God, I wish she was my mum. I mean, in ways, you know, I miss her every day. This is the thing, is I really miss her energy, and I really miss the good Brenda more than words can say, but I don't miss the bad Brenda for 1 second.
And then you talking about Brenda interrupting things, is what I love about the letters is you interrupt her. So throughout the letters in the book, Emma's added footnotes where she gives context, or you sort of tell the truth to certain things.
Yes.
And it's so fun reading. Once you get into that in the book, where it's like every time you see a little number, you're like, oh yes, what's Emma going to say about this?
Well, you know, she gilded the lily. Let's just say that she didn't shy away from making herself look good. But yeah, it's just sort of funny asides, really. Observations. I was reading them.
It does. It's, you know, like you say, then it's the reality of it, isn't it? And going back to you saying that she clearly wanted to be a writer, because she's writing these letters to you, and you know the truth a lot of the time. So it's like, well, who's she lying to?
Also, like a lot of the longer travel ones. Some of which I had not seen before. I mean, the one about Prague, I was crying, laughing reading it. And I asked Dad whether any of it was true, and he said, yes, it was true. But that's a really good, I won't say anything about that letter because it's just phenomenal. Yeah.
That's the thing, isn't it, to talk about it, because you don't really want to spoil some of it, because it is such like fanciful little adventures, almost like you say, where they're like monologues, where one thing leads to an argument, leads to something.
Yeah, I know. She loved an argument. That was like her favourite. That was her hobby, was arguing with people. She would get a visceral thrill from it, especially if it was a stranger.
Tony was willing to let it slide, but I wasn't.
he's a saint, isn't he?
Yeah, he definitely is. Yeah, he seems like the most patient man.
I did after my mother had 2 affairs. And I was talking about this yesterday with a friend of mine, but she was outrageous. I don't know how she managed to do this, but she managed to persuade my father to take the second person she had an affair with on holiday with them. And then she would say to him, "Can you go and get croissant?" And my dad would sort of potter off into town to get croissant, and that's when they'd be at it. I mean, she was unbelievable. And I said to Dad, "Why did you put up with this? Just why?" Because I couldn't begin to understand why he stayed with her. But I think it's because they were best friends. They really were best friends. And he really, really loved her. And despite what she did, she really, really loved him as well. But she just, I won't reveal it, but when I finished the manuscript, we sent it to a clinical psychiatrist, because I'm not a clinical psychiatrist and I'm not able to diagnose my mother. I sort of arrived at a best guess, but it wasn't a diagnosis. And he wrote me a letter. I wasn't expecting this to happen. I was just expecting to get some notes back from him. And he wrote me this amazing letter that's so amazing. We asked him if we could publish it as the epilogue at the end. So you will, and he diagnosed her. So you will discover what she suffered with. But there's no doubt in my mind that the hypersexualization was definitely part of her condition, no doubt. Yeah. I think she just couldn't help it. Yeah.
And not even but she sort of what's the best way of wording it? She sort of used sexuality to get what she wanted
that was her superpower. Yeah. I mean, if you hold up the book, you'll see what she looked like. I mean, look at that. I mean, she could have been a movie star. She was beautiful. She was absolutely beautiful. I mean, men fell over themselves with her, and also she was incredibly charming and really funny, and she had magical properties. She's like a wicked fairy in a cautionary tale for children.
The book, as well as being about your mom, is also a sort of subtle autobiography of your career as well. Was that intentional, or did that sort of just happen as you
Well, it sort of it was. The book was much longer, and we cut out all the bits that were just about me. So it ended up not being that. Yeah. We decided that we just had to stick to stuff that related to my mum. So that it was always my life through her eyes, I suppose, in that, or just what parts of my life, the effect that had on her. So it was an interesting process, but yeah.
It's fascinating to learn that through you telling your mum about something like the things that didn't happen, and the projects you were working on that you thought would go well. Everything you worked on, Brenda, was like, this is it. This is your big break.
From the off, from the very off. It was like at my first year at Oxford. At the end of that year, I was in a comedy group with Stewart Lee and Richard Herring that was called the Seven Raymonds, and we were told that we were going to be the sort of the support group of going up to Edinburgh Festival that year. And my mum literally just went, "Edinburgh Festival? You're going to Edinburgh Festival?" She says, "You realise you've made it now? You have made it!" And it was like, I mean, nothing could have been further from the truth. It was just extraordinary. That summer, I slept under a coffin. I'm not joking. I slept under a coffin in a Masonic lodge, and every single person that was there got athlete's foot. That's it. And we had 2 large bins, those old-fashioned black plastic bins, dustbins, and one was full of cornflakes, and the other one was full of pasta. And there was one toilet for 60 people and one hand basin, and that was it. Yeah, we made it all right.
Glamorous showbiz lifestyle. But then
that was also I must tell this story. That was the year where Stewart Lee arrived. He was 2 hours late for rehearsal one morning, and he had brought with him an enormous bag of cream horns. And we thought, why are you late? And why are you bringing cream horns? And he just very quietly said, because I've just lost my virginity. So we celebrated with cream horns, which I think should become a thing. I think people should you should go away and tell all the young people in your lives that that's how they need to celebrate losing their virginity. So, if someone just presents you with a cream horn, the deal has been done.
Well done. But your other book, you've got lots of books.
I've got lots of books, yeah.
The other book that includes Brenda within it, the 10th book in me, was like a bestseller, and she was still alive when that came out. How did she feel about that? Was she?
She used to go and stand in bookshops next to it and wait for someone to pick it up, and then she'd go, "Oh, hello, I'm Brenda from the 10th book Academy. Would you like me to sign that?"
So she liked it?
Yes, she liked it, yeah. Yes. And also, she comes across very well in that book,
And then obviously that led on to the Kennedys that you wrote, but that she died before that.
Yeah, it was really tough. That I was finishing the scripts as she was dying. And although there was one funny moment, I was literally, she wanted me, I was writing the pilot script, and she wanted me to read it to her, but she was literally on her deathbed. This was like 3 days before she died. And I read it out to her, and she could barely speak at this point, but she stopped me at one point and just put her hand on my arm and just went, "You're going to have to change that name. Your father still sees her in Sainsbury's." But she died, and then we had to film the pilot 3 weeks later, and that was really tough.
Because Tony was on the set.
Yeah, my dad, there was one day when my dad rang me in the morning, and I think he didn't want to be on his own. And he asked if he could come to set, and it coincided with us filming a scene where Brenda and Tony are in a bathroom with Emma, and Emma's, I've seen something that I shouldn't have seen, and I've got a big blabbermouth, and they're basically trying to make sure that I don't open it. And that was a scene that was pretty much word for word what had actually happened. And when we were filming in someone's house, so it was a very, it wasn't like being in a studio where the actors are quite a way away and the monitors are all way back. So we were all sort of in close proximity, and you have to keep really, really, really quiet during takes. And we were during a take, and I just noticed Dad just suddenly looked as if he was about to have a coughing fit or something, and I just went like that, and he wasn't having a coughing fit, he was breaking down. And so we had to clear the set, and he was in a complete state. Yeah. But it's completely understandable.
Yeah, and it's stories like that sort of prove how much he loved her and how much he cared. He
was her primary carer for the last 10 years of her life, after she had cancer and then it went away again and then it came back again. But I mean, you know, the reason she's dead is because of the paranoia that she was in the grips of, because she refused. She thought that she'd been. I sat with her in a consultant's room at the Royal Marsden, and she told the consultant that she'd been given cancer by a CIA operative in a bookshop in Cambridge. And so she was really, 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 really paranoid, which I sort of thank God the pandemic didn't happen in her lifetime, because she would not have been able to cope with it at all. No. But she refused to have chemotherapy or a mastectomy, and she thought that it was a conspiracy between the doctors and Dad and me to kill her. So she didn't have any treatment. Mm. We eventually persuaded her to have some radiotherapy, and that sort of kept her going for a bit, but you know, it was always going to come back, and then that was that.
You play to her vanity at one point, don't you? Right? There's someone next to her in the hospital who's had the.
Oh yes, there was a woman in the bed next to her who'd, because we were desperate for her to have a mastectomy. It's like, just please have a mastectomy, dear God, please. But she wouldn't do it, but there was a woman in the bed next to her who'd had 2 elective mastectomies, because all of her they had the BRCA gene, and she was doing the sensible thing, and they had done a reconstruction at the same time, so she'd also had a tummy tuck at the same time. So I literally tried that on Mum. I said, look, you know, you can have that and it done at the same time. You get flat tummy, etc. But no, she's having none of it. Absolutely none of it. She was miserable in hospital until Sue Perkins turned up to visit her, and then she was, yes, I know Sue Perkins, to all the nurses. Ridiculous creature.
Then going back to what you were saying earlier about your Irish passport, is you did contact Brenda.
Oh,
since you've lost her.
Yes.
You want to tell that
story?
So
my Aunt Phyllis came to see me. She just popped in to see me, and she just tossed out this small fact that she'd been to see a medium and that Brenda had come through. I said, stop it. I said, don't be ridiculous. And she was, no, I went to see a medium and Brenda came through. So I thought, you know, just did that old rubby chin thing, and I thought, well, I don't believe in any of this, but it would be a good anecdote for the book. So I'll cross the T and dot the I's, and I will go and see the medium. So I booked in under a false name. I was wearing a mask, because we had to wear masks back then. And the first thing she said to me, Brenda came through immediately, and the first thing she said to me was, there's a problem with the names on the birth certificate. And at that point, a chill went through me, and I just sort of went, what? Because when I was trying to get my Irish passport, which should have been a very straightforward process because my grandmother was Irish, I just needed her birth certificate, I hit a massive snafu because my great-grandmother had put my great-grandfather's name the wrong way round on the birth certificate. And so we couldn't find my grandmother because the names were the wrong way round. And I hadn't told anybody this other than a researcher from Who Do You Think You Are, who Perkins put me in touch with in order to sort the mess out. But it took 6 months, but it was a massive, massive, massive problem. So the names were the wrong way round on the birth certificate. And I hadn't told anyone that. And I'd given no interviews about it, hadn't mentioned it at all. So it was like, oh my God. Anyway, then she moaned for half an hour about my dad's then new girlfriend. And just said she's going to take his money at the end, and she did. She did.
And she knew he'd got a bad leg as well.
Yeah, she knew he had a bad leg. She knew he'd broken his leg. It was weird. It was really weird. It was really, it was sort of, I came away from it thinking that was sort of an incredible experience, and it doesn't matter actually if it was all bullshit, because I feel like I've spoken with my mother, which is incredible, but something happened in it that sort of was like a light bulb moment for me. And again, it didn't matter if this was just the medium saying it. It triggered a sort of a sense of peace in me. In that Brenda said that she had been misunderstood in her lifetime, and the medium kept saying it's like I've got two people here at once. And she was, and I think she was misunderstood in her lifetime, but that, of course, was her fault to a certain extent, because she never sought help for what she had. But the positive way to look at that is that however bad it was for her, it was never so bad that she needed to have medical intervention. She should have had medical intervention. She would have had a much calmer life. But she obviously had found a way of living with it. And also, given, that her illness would have come to light in the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, if she had spoken to anybody about it, she would have been institutionalized for the entirety of her life, and she would never have had the life that she had.
Yeah, it's going back to the sort of shame thing, isn't it, that you were talking about at the beginning?
Yeah, shame is a really dirty, damaging thing, and no one should ever carry it, ever, under any circumstance, because the minute you talk about something, there will be things that everyone feels slightly ashamed of, and there will be things that people feel very ashamed of, but you have to just get rid of that shit and just expunge it from your soul.
Going back to what I was saying earlier about you interrupting her with the footnotes throughout the book, is that's done really well in your audiobook version of this.
Yes.
Which I've been listening to this week, and the lead up to this is just like, I was like, I wonder how you're going to do the footnotes, because if you leave them to the end of the letter, they wouldn't work as well. And you literally interrupt the letter in the audiobook.
I do, yeah. Brenda is played by Juliet Stevenson in the audiobook.
Which she would have loved.
Oh my God. If my mother knew that she was being played by Juliet Stevenson, she would have gone around with it tattooed on her forehead. It was really funny because obviously she knew about the Kennedys, and I told her that Catherine Parkinson was playing her in the TV series, and she didn't know who she was, so she was fuming. She was absolutely fuming. Who's going to be me? But Juliet Stevenson, that would have been, yeah.
But yes, as she's recounting the story, you just sort of, your voice suddenly pops in. And
yes.
Some of my favourite ones is where it's just you hysterically laughing. Like she'll say something and it just
ha ha ha. Yeah. That wouldn't have been a ha ha ha. She's being funny. That would have been like hell that happened. Yeah.
But it's great, it's. I was talking to Richard Herron about it yesterday here, because he's done a similar thing with his audiobook of just putting in that extra effort, so it is something different from reading the book to listen. It's worth doing both almost. Is that from working in radio over the years? Or
I mean, it sort of, I suppose, comes down to what the book is and what your tastes are. But I think it lent itself really well to it almost sounding like you're listening to a radio series, I suppose. But it's got incidental music and atmos and stuff under it. But that was all down to the engineer who was doing the audiobook. He was really, really good. And he just had the vision to to do it that way, because we had a long chat about how we were going to do the footnotes
Yeah.
and whether we were going to put the footnotes in at all
Oh no,
to
they
the
need
audio,
to be.
but it worked really well.
Yeah, yeah. The footnotes are so crucial. I think anyway
Yeah.
to the letters. What are you working on now? You got
Now,
anything planned? Or?
Yes, I've got what I hope will be my next book, which is called Dead to Begin With,
Okay.
which is sort of a comedy crime thriller.
Ooh.
So there's that. I'm writing a film with Katie Brand, which is an adaptation of a Terry Jones children's book called Nicobobinus. But all the Python members who are alive are as we speak, signed up to be involved. So that's very exciting. So I'm sort of basically writing a Python film, which is mad.
So cool.
That's mad. So I'm doing that. And then I've got I've written a TV drama which has been commissioned by the BBC, which I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but that'll be happening, and then various other things, bits and bobs.
Always busy.
Always hustling.
You got it. And then, because we're at a literature festival, have you got any books that you'd like to recommend that you're enjoying at the minute? Or that
I tell you what I'm reading at the moment is Hilary Mantel's The Mirror and the Light, the final one in the trilogy. It's about this thick. But I decided that once and for all I was going to have to read those 3 books, and I sort of feel like I need a brownie badge at the end of it, don't you? Because they are a commitment. So I'm reading those, and even though I think Hilary Mantel books could probably be half the length, it doesn't really matter, because the quality of her writing is so incredible that you just enjoy that. But the other book that I have a book that I always return to between writing projects, and I read it specifically to remind myself what really good, elegant, efficient writing is, which is a book called Swimming Home by Deborah Levy. And if you've never read that, then I thoroughly recommend you read it.
And now, if anyone here has any questions, I was just going to say, Emma loves answering questions.
I do. I love answering questions.
So
you can ask me anything. I don't
they
care.
don't have to be about this book.
No,
They
you can
be
ask
about
me anything.
she's
If you want
written.
gossip, I'll give it to you.
Hey guys, Future Mark here, just to say, as I did with the Richard Herring one, I've cut out the Q&A from the people in the audience, because even though Emma had some brilliant answers, again, I didn't get the people's permission to use their voices, and it probably would have been okay, but just to play it safe, I haven't. But what I've left in, just so my outro makes more sense, is Emma's answer to the final question, which was about Happy Valley and how it was going to end. And I don't actually watch the show, so I didn't have any clue here what she's talking about. So I don't know if she got it right or she didn't. So feel free to let me know either way if she got it right or if she didn't. But here's Emma's synopsis of Happy Valley, or what she thought, or how she thought Happy Valley was going to end, I should say.
Who do I think's fantastic? I mean, there are lots of fantastic people. Oh, Sarah Lancashire.
Yeah.
Sarah Lancashire, I would I would die and go to heaven if I wrote something in Sarah Lancashire. Who's going to watch Happy Valley tonight? What's your best guess? Shall I tell you my best guess? This is a guess, so it's not a spoiler. Shall I tell you my best guess? So I think there's going to be it's all going to be a massive showdown at Nev's. I think Tommy's going to kill Claire. And I tell you for why I think that, because of that speech that Sarah Lancashire said in the previous, and I bet you, like me, was just going, oh no, don't say that. So I think something terrible is going to happen to Claire. Now, Ryan has twice said revenge is a dish best served cold. He said it twice. So I'm now thinking that he's going to take his revenge on Tommy. So I think Ryan's going to kill Tommy, and I think Catherine's going to have to nick him. And well, she will. She'll have to nick him. So I think that's what's going to happen. I could be wrong. If Catherine dies, I'm going to find Sally Wainwright and murder her in the eye.
Ladies and gentlemen, Emma Kennedy.
What a bombshell to end on.
You have to embarrass yourself, Mark.